Whatever. We're live.
Good evening. Welcome to our first of several budget meetings. It is April 13th. Around the table, we have Councilor Dean, Councilor Carson, Councilor Walker, Councilor Leonard, Councilor Beck, Councilor Mallor, Councilor Fish, and I'm Sue Hawes, Councilor Fox. Okay. So we're going to get right to it and let City Manager Leah take the reins.
Sure. For a brief amount of time, and then we'll have each of the department heads come up, which is how we're gonna sort of tackle it this year. With me doing less of the talking. Unfortunately, our finance director, Stephanie Kimball, couldn't be here tonight. So I ask for your patience. We'll take lots of notes of questions if there are things that we need to follow up on with her. I think the department heads all know the ins and outs of their departments really well, but Stephanie is the brain behind the budget books. So there's probably instances where you'll have questions about the books and we'll need to defer to Stephanie at a later date. So I apologize for that. With that, we can jump in at the top of the agenda unless anyone has any sort of immediate questions to start for me.
Any immediate questions? All
right. So I think first up is in the book is Lisa. If you would like to go first.
It's a good one, City Clerk. I guess first I'll just give you some highlights from this past year. As I've told you before, the tax collector got her certification, which she worked diligently on that over the last couple of years to get her certification. The upgrade to our online payments that we've been working on, we are inches away from that going live. We're just waiting for some information from the finance department to go to the bank, and then we have to do a test that money comes in, money goes out properly, and then we can have that link put onto our website. And then residents will be able to go in and make payments to taxes and utility at real time. So there will be no, right now they can do that, they can go on and pay, but they can't see how much is actually owed on the accounts. They can just make a payment. This way they'll be able to go in, if there's interest due on their accounts, they'll be able to figure that all out and make a payment. And it goes directly onto their account so that there's nobody here in this office and our office that has to manually the next day go in and put that payment into the account, which we have to do now, which will save us probably 1 to 2 hours a day from those online payments. So we just almost there. It's taken a lot longer than I thought it would. In the clerk and treasury office, we handle probably about 40 emails a day, 50 phone calls, and I will tell you, we struggle to answer the phone because we do not have the manpower. Everybody is waiting on customers, and it is a problem in our office, but we do feel that many. We try to call them back as quickly as we can. Our foot traffic, we average about 135 a day. That swells up to 300 during tax time or during elections. We get super busy. We generate probably 1,000, close to 1,000 utility bills every week. So those utility bills are going out. Of course, the mail is going to come back with the payments. So it's that is ongoing always. We average 145,000 transactions every year. That equates to about $108 million that we're receiving in. Rapid renewal, that's the online motor vehicle. We do 6,150 of those on a yearly basis. So those, we don't have to do anything except for file it in the book and upload information into our system. So that's work that we don't have to do, that people do that right online. Our mail, we average that we're 2 weeks behind all the time. During our busy season, it can go to 4 weeks behind. And if you're thinking about our busy season, it could be $2 to $4 million into sitting there not being processed. We did work overtime on a Saturday, and they were able to process in about $4 million worth of mail in a day. There were 6 people working, they worked for 6 hours, and that's what they were able to do with no interruptions. Any questions on any of that?
Have you ever figured out how much interest you're losing?
I have not done that.
Is enough to fill another position? I mean, is it substantial?
I would have to check that. I have to go through finance because I don't have,
I think that would be a
Interest
good
rate.
thing for us to see.
yeah. Yeah, I can definitely get that from you, from finance department. Something else I did, and just looking at the overall operation, is to compare us to the other larger communities within the state to see, what do we do? What do they do? Do they have any of these same issues that we do? There were only 4 of the larger population of the top, I'd say the top 10. There was only 4 communities that actually have the clerk and treasury offices merged. We are the only one that does utility billing. And out of the top 10, there's only 2 communities that the treasurer's office did the utility billing. And that was South Portland and Bangalore. And most of those offices have 4 people on the front line, we have 6. So I'm just trying to see what the difference is. And the closest population would have been Auburn. And we have a population of 7,000 more than Auburn does. And they have 4 people on their counter. So it just gives you, they are in the same, Auburn is in the same boat we are as far as not being able to get their work done. The turnover of staff, the burnout that they're feeling, the anxiety that the workers feel, the long wait lines, full lobby, they have the same exact thing, and they merged last year. So I'm kind of leaning now towards maybe bigger communities. That's a difficult task to manage, merging those 2 together. So I just want to give you that information because I did, do some research on it to see, are we doing something that we should be doing differently? Or, has somebody else really got this down? But I know talking with the clerk in Auburn, she struggles with this, the same things that we're struggling with. So it's not isolated.
Hey, I just had a question on that, and maybe the answer to this is just not even worth pursuing, but so I had my concerns early on about merging both these departments together. Is there an off-ramp at all that we can absolutely use, or are we too far into this system to even separate those 2 departments?
I would hate to see us separate it back out again. I mean, just for the makeup of the office itself now, how we have it, how it's all configured. I mean, yes, we could do that. And, maybe we could have one side clerk, one side treasury. We could certainly try that too.
But would that, do you think it would be more sustainable, more operationally valid to continue as is and try to work out the kinks?
I would like to try to work the kinks out.
Okay.
I really would.
Okay.
I know the automations had some kinks we're working out. But from what you've seen that you've been able to work out and the help and assistance that's been able to provide as it improves and as it gets more efficient, do you see that helping the workload? How do you see that helping to take some of the workload off?
It depends on whether the residents use it, because there still is that fee that's associated with that, like your credit card, there's a 3.5% that you're gonna pay on that. So how many people pay their taxes that way? They can do an e-check, which is $3.95 for that transaction. But if they're going to pay their taxes, are they gonna come into the office? Probably. They're not, they're gonna send a check. They're not going to use that service. So right now, we've got over 4,000 people doing things online, and I'm sure they'll continue. Maybe more will pick it up too, where they can actually go in and see what they have, and if they have a lien, they can pay that lien online. It's not gonna be that they have to come in. It's only if the property is assured that they would have to come in and see us.
Councilor Beck?
This might be a question maybe for the finance director to answer later, but have we looked into lockbox processing with our local bank?
Yes, we have, and it's really not an option for us. We actually just did that a couple of months ago. We looked into it and had conversations. Because there's still, that money is being put in there, but somebody still has to do the work and we gotta pay them, so it's really not cost effective for us to do it. Yeah. On that. So with with my budget, the only thing really that went up substantially was the postage. The postage fees went up and the recording fees at the registry also went up. So you'll see on the treasury side that did raise up. Other than that, it's the personnel costs. We have one big election next year. We don't have two, but it's a big one, so. There was, the state is going out to RFP right now for new voting tabulators. So we will be entering into a contract with them for our tabulators probably in the summer. And I did increase that just a little bit just to cover that. But other than that, I have requested the two positions. One is for on the clerk side, really, to do the functions there. We're not getting any of our filing done. I still have not got all of our files changed over from my move back. You know, it's just, we don't have the time to do it. And that person can answer emails, phone calls, do all of those things on that side. The other position really is on the tax collector side. There is no one that is cross-trained to do the tax collector. So if something happens to her, we have no one. I mean, I have a little bit of knowledge of tax collection, but nothing like her. And when we, right before we merged, when the tax collector went to the finance director position, that person moved out of the treasury office and those duties were absorbed by the people that were there and they never replaced that position. And we tried putting the deputy tax collector position in with the utility billing clerk, but she is so busy, there's no way that she can learn any of the duties with tax collector. So, you know, this position would be someone that would be there for them. They would be doing all of the rental cars that we have. We do almost 2,000 of those a year, and that takes somebody off the counter to do those because they come in, there might be 20 or there might be 150 cars and they're waiting for them. They want us to get those done right away. So we have to take someone off the counter, which just snowballs all the other work.
I just had a quick question. So I think it's important before talking about these positions to also talk about how your office was able to do all this work and still barely get by without these positions before. I won't name her name, but the person who volunteered countless amounts of hours to help your team out took a huge burden off the workload and allowed you to do other pertinent things as well. So she's no longer here. That was a individual who was, I won't name her name, but she's an absolute incredible citizen. And also, when it does come time to election year, whenever busy work does actually start to happen, that usually just falls to you, basically, to do a lot of that necessary work. But then when election time comes, there are other things that take precedent that you have to focus on. And a lot of that work, so such as mails coming in, that has to get put off to the side because we just don't have the team that's there to actually process a lot of that work. So the reason why I think it's important to bring this up is because I know last year had its struggles, but you guys were able to get through that. I am very hesitant of the future to not give you guys the support that you need because we need to make sure our mail is processed. We need to make sure that we have everyone not burning out in your department as well. And that's always been a fear of mine. I know that's been a fear of yours as well. And so So I guess I'm just speaking to the council now, but these were this department brought forward two positions before last year. And they were voted down basically, and those were, in my opinion, the two most important things that we should have added to our budget last year. I think it would be a really bad oversight to not heed these warnings again, because there's also money that we're losing by not having these positions here as well. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of that. I'd love to hear your perspective on both of those topics, but I know that's been a huge concern from you and your department. Well,
We did have a volunteer. She worked for us for probably 7, 8 years. And she would come in and she did all of the election prep work that we had. And she would, she would get all of the envelopes ready. She would make sure that all of the applications were, she would review all of the work that when we print out the labels to go to a voter, she would check the application and make sure that everything matched up so that we were mixing things up, sending somebody the wrong ballot. She was very diligent, and I mean, the last election, she wasn't here and we got through it. I mean, but I did hire on some extra help during that time because, we just couldn't do it ourselves. And when elections come, yes, the other work does go on the back burner. We don't have the manpower to do it. The things that we can let slide, we let slide. And I know, I don't think that's different than other departments. It's just what we have to do for that. But it's a struggle, and I think in the future it's gonna be harder, especially when there's a lot of different election laws that could change, and that will be very concerning.
I have a question that I'm sure it's easy to explain, and I know sometimes the bill hasn't come in or hasn't been paid, so there's a bit of a shift. Last year, under revenue increase, last year it was a revenue decrease, like 1850. This year it's a revenue increase, in the parentheses, 19,500 in the revenue. What does that represent?
Yeah, I can't give you that answer. I'm not sure. It could be on the tax collection side, and I would have to look that up.
So it's probably something that just, depending upon the timing, it was recorded last year and this year, that's the difference, but.
Yeah, it could be something that came in later, but I can find out for you.
And the only other comment I have to say is, when you guys are overstaffed and you're working so hard, it does affect, not just, the bills to be paid or the taxes, but we had a real estate transaction on Tuesday and they couldn't get through, and it affected 2 families because we had a VA rate that was locked in and we had to close. They called several times, and luckily I was able to run down, and the clerk was great. She dropped everything and she gave me that. But I mean, we were like within an hour of being able to close, and that family, he would have had to ship out the next day. They wouldn't have been able to move in their house. It would have been a real domino effect, and a very unfortunate situation. So it affects not just, the interest on the monies we could deposit, but it affects, with closings and title attorneys that need to verify those bills with City Hall, it affects closings and real people out there. So appreciate all you guys are trying to do, and they dropped everything to accommodate me. We were able to get it done.
Yeah, she told me that she saw you in the hallway and you were standing there, so she
I was
asked.
kind of frantic because it was like half that.
That's a prime example of the Tuesday after a holiday and what happens in our office. And we had one person out on vacation, so it snowballs, everything snowballs from that point.
She was great. She got me what I needed and closed.
So if I might, I think you'll recall, I sort of presented you a triangle that tried to sort of display providing basic services, delivering on council priorities, and sort of investments in the future. These 2 positions are definitely just to get Lisa to a place where she feels like she can provide the baseline level of customer service, ensure cross-training, have continuity of operations when someone's out sick or for prolonged leave. These aren't positions that are sort of pie in the sky wishes. They're very much related to Lisa's basic function.
You have a question, comments? Okay.
I think Bill is next in the book, at least in order.
Oh, thank you.
Although Phil doesn't have any new positions or programs requested. Pretty easy.
Oh, Phil's a man.
No, I'm still gonna ask. So, Phil Drew, city assessor, I think everyone goes on the parcel viewer. They can pretty much see everything that the city assessing office does, right? You have to keep track of who owns what property in town, whether it's real property or business personal property. We make most of the GIS modifications on parcel size with the help of the city engineer's office. And yeah. Keep track of all of that, their core functions. And especially with ownership information, right? Wastewater, stormwater, and building, they're all using that same data. So we try to diligently keep track of who owns what. And accomplishments, I think, working with KRT on the revaluation, as we going. The second thing would be we entered into an outside legal services contract with Run Central. They have a team that will be available to assist us with tax appeals in 2026, 2027, and on the revaluation. And I'd say the biggest one was really onboarding the two positions over the last year. So both the city appraiser and technician. That gone very well. I couldn't be happier. So I don't need new people. So we are the right size, with the right staff. I think accomplishing everything we need to accomplish. But here's my ask. So I would still like 3 board members for the Board of Assessment Review. So I've got 5 regular members, positions for Phil. So I need 1 regular member and 2 associate members. So I would just ask if there are people that have applied. Is it possible to move those candidates forward? Expedited, if I may ask. That way I can start training and developing them to be good board members for all the tax appeals that generally come with a revaluation. So, yeah, that's my ask.
To that end, are we able to put something on our social media to talk about how exciting it is, this opportunity to be on that board? And would any of us at the table be willing to act in a video maybe to reenact how exciting it is to be on that board and promote it? Because I think we should be going to work to get those 4 members.
So David Warren, about 6 weeks ago, he did send something out on social media, inviting more people to apply, describing the role in a very thoughtful, uplifting way. And we think you invited 1 or 2 applications.
We're getting the nod that you do probably have some people that are
Yeah.
interested.
So that's my real ask. And then I think on the budget side, the budget increase is generally employee staff development. Yes. So years ago, I read a nice journal article from the International Association of Assessing Officers, and they gave the hard numbers. They just said, if you have 1% to 2% of your budget for staff development, that's probably a reasonable range. It shouldn't be below 1, much above 2. So I think we're in that sweet spot. And that would be really the largest change, other than some change associated with having two pieces of software that we help pay for with both Patriot and Trio. But other than that, everything's going well. Whatever questions you might have.
Just a general one about the assessing department as a whole. So post revaluation, what do you see as the assessing department's primary objective, mission, or role, or how do you see it? Let's say evolving over the next 5 years.
I would say probably the first year after revaluation. I think there's a lot of, people will accept the number maybe in the beginning, and then shortly thereafter, I think there'll be a lot of calls or interest in maybe having us come out and take a look ourselves. Just because we know that, the majority have not had an interior inspection. So I think the next year is a pretty heavy year of inspections. And I believe myself and 3 others, I think that's the core staff level move us well into the future. And when I started with the assessing department, we had 6. And we're down to 4. So it's the right size. Yep.
Okay.
And I think we'll have plenty of work, because I think there are probably 600 building permits each year from code enforcement. So we would be following up on those. Yep. And I think we're the right size.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Yes, no, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Mallory, you have a question?
Yeah, well, a couple of quick questions. It's nothing actually to do with what I'm concerned about. What are we going to be using for valuation to determine the tax rate for this year?
So
We have to do that by what date?
KRT is gonna give me some numbers at the beginning of June. And I will present them to you folks on June 10th.
Is that the latest date we can get it? I mean, I just wanna prepare for the worst.
So those would be the preliminary numbers. And I would gauge,
That's
How-
what we
how-
use to establish the tax rate.
how comfortable they are with those numbers, right? Because it's still gonna be sent out to the property owner. And the property owner is still gonna have the opportunity to sit down with KRT to hash out whether they think, everything was considered.
Understand that, but I'm just concerned about, as far as the state's concerned, when do we have to have the final valuation to determine the tax rate?
Okay, yep. So it's really the 4th week of July is the
So
delivery.
that's by the time we have to. So it's difficult to establish a budget without knowing what the tax rate potential is. So we have until, by June 10th, you'll give us at least an idea of what it is.
Right, so I've made adjustments to the current data on what I think would be the necessary adjustments. So I'll have a total value for real property from my own work and my staff's work. And then I'll get the number from KRT and I'll be able to see how close they
Yeah,
are.
no major differences. Okay, I just wasn't sure if we locked in early, if we could make a change or if we were tied to it, or was a concern, not so.
Yeah, and I'll bring what I believe at that time in June 10th. I will give you my
Okay.
true opinion of the accuracy and how comfortable KRT is with those numbers.
The success rate has been good.
What's that?
I said they've been successful in completing their projects for other places. I hear different stories.
No, I think they're a little bit behind,
That's what I thought.
but they said they'll be more diligent. So I worked with a Bangor School Department. So we have June 16th is the planned date that public information on the process we'll have the Peaks Auditorium set aside. So the more dates I set, firm dates, closes the window that they have to complete the work. So hopefully that's a motivator.
And there's a penalty clause if they don't perform.
That's correct.
Any other question?
And just a note, I sort of messaged to department heads, if not to, there's no real need to delve into the things that we've already talked about that are driving the budget. Wages, cost of living, health insurance, the paid family medical leave program. I've asked folks just to sort of hone in on the things that are unique for their department, even though for most departments, especially today, the drivers of their budget are those sort of small handful of things. And then I think our city solicitor is up next.
Dave Zepchak, City Solicitor. I wanted to talk about our department, some of the highlights or accomplishments. One of the things about our department is 2 full-time attorneys and 1 25-hour-a-week legal assistant. And that's the way it has been since I started here. And well before that. The department is stable. Our legal assistant has been here over 3 years. The assistant city solicitor will be here 3 years in November, and very happy with the way the department is. I think the personnel is makes things easy for me, relatively easy. One of the things that we took on after already having a full-time set of duties was sort of leading the interdepartmental effort, the team working on the enforcement of the vacant buildings registration ordinance. And last time I gave you a city solicitor update, we talked about some of the successes that we've had this year in increased numbers of registrations as a result of the team's efforts, increased numbers of properties that get off the vacant property, have gotten off the vacant property list this year. And this year it included enforcement of that in either potential or court actions, and those actions have had successful results. The idea of and my department hasn't really made any significant requests for changes since I've been here, but I do have 2 requests in the budget this year. So one of the requests is a request for an additional attorney. That attorney would be, the idea being that that attorney would be focused on that multi-departmental team and the enforcement effort. The goal of the enforcement effort is to reduce the number of vacant buildings in the city, increase the city's available residential housing, and improve the sustainability of the city's income tax base. And so we have looked at some of the other comparable cities, and it looks like we fall below what the other cities use in terms of attorneys. Portland has 6 in-house attorneys and 2 in-house paralegals doing their work that are exclusively used for their municipal work. Augusta actually has 6 or 7 attorneys that are outsourced as well, but Augusta has probably a little bit more legal work due to where they are. Waterville has 3 attorneys that they use. Auburn has 3 attorneys that they use. Lewiston has 4+ attorneys. So that's one of the big differences in the proposed budget for legal is a request for an additional attorney that would be focused mainly on the enforcement operation, the goal of the multi-level team. The other big request that we made this year is for an additional part-time legal assistant. When there actually has been a rising demand for the legal department's efforts ongoing. Increased number of FOA requests, increased number of requests in general. We've increased the litigation that goes on. And the legal assistant that we have is 25 hours a week, but she is overly qualified and terrific. I believe Carolyn referred to as a unicorn, and that I don't know that we would find someone else like her if we went out to the marketplace and looked. But when she's not here, the attorneys have to we're required to perform time-consuming administrative tasks during those times. And I don't think those tasks are not the highest and best use of the attorney's time and skills and competencies. And so we've made the request for a 20-hour-a-week part-time legal assistant. The other program request we made was for the FOA software that would be needed to increase efficiency, improve accuracy, reduce staff's time spent on responding to requests, elevate compliance, mitigate risk, improve public trust, ensure security, and streamline records request management. That I know that was something that the council showed interest in last time that we talked about that. So that is built in as one of the requests, and those are really the only 3 areas where we have requests, and places where the budget is different than it has been in the other years since I've been here.
If I might jump in, because I do feel bad, because I think the new lawyer may have originated with me. And I think Dave would say that he would probably prioritize the new legal assistant and the software over the lawyer. So I do want to say that out loud for his benefit. But I also want to make a pitch for the new lawyer as it relates to property taxes. Because there's really 2 ways to reduce property tax rates. You can either reduce your budget, or you can increase your property tax base by either creating new properties or increasing the value of properties. And I see the focus on vacant buildings and dilapidated properties and code enforcement issues to all relate very strongly to the property tax base and increasing the value of our property tax base. I don't think there's a way to give you a straight line calculation of if you hired a new lawyer, you would see this much additional value over a course of time, such that we could say it would pay for itself with confidence. But I do think that investments like this towards increasing the property tax base overall is good for the community.
Thank you for articulating that. So, are there any questions?
Go ahead.
On the part-time, would that offset any of the costs that go into outsourcing, like when Board of Ethics has questions and it has to be researched? Having someone in-house part-time, would that be work they would pick up, or is that something we still have to outsource?
That would be, there could be less outsourcing because they're doing the administrative tasks that Grace and I are doing when we don't have an assistant here. the ratio of legal assistant to attorneys is, so the legal assistant is doing both legal assistant type work and also administrative and secretarial tasks, and to have coverage during those hours when we don't have coverage would be essential in freeing us up to do other things that are more lawyer-like
Yeah.
to be doing, and that, I think that would reduce outsourcing.
Yeah, and when we outsource, we're paying a premium, whereas.
Yes.
I'd rather do it in-house. And then the other question I have, I know we can't calculate, although it would be nice to get an idea of what the lawyer would, because I mean, everyone knows what the possible increase in the overall tax bill is gonna be. And at the end of the day, we have to sell this to the public. And if there's something we can tell them, you know, I mean, I agree on this, that, hey, you know, the more properties we activate, the more people pay taxes. But we don't know how much, or even a ballpark. And, you know, are we losing money in the long run? Because if I'm asking someone to pay $800 a month or a year in additional taxes, that's gonna be a tough sell. So I guess that would be one to kind of hear more about it, even any kind of projection we could come up with based on, you know, here's the work we've done so far. Because those spreadsheets we get are great. Let's say, look at all the properties we had on there and look at what we took off. And, you know, even if we could just say, hey, by adding this additional lawyer, you know, it's possible we could, you know, bring up X number of properties off that list additional, you know, and depending on what properties they pick, this is the kind of tax base it could be, you know, and no one's gonna hold anyone's feet to the fire and say it has to be to the penny. But when we were all done, we're putting the bow on this thing, we have to sell it to the public. I just want to be able to tell a good story.
We can put our heads together and
Yeah.
really try to come up with something, knowing that it won't be, you know, exact.
Right.
Right.
In this year alone, we've added tasks to the legal department quite frequently. Anytime we've wanted an ordinance reviewed, or somebody wants a new ordinance or whatever, the council decided they wanted it reviewed first by legal before it came to us to talk about and potentially vote on it. So that alone are things that, would you keep those in your control, or would you divvy that up with a new attorney? What would your choice? You still go to meetings?
The new attorney would have a focus on the team of the vacant property enforcement, but that doesn't mean the new attorney wouldn't do some of the other things as well, and
So it would ease up a bit on.
yeah, I think that would be, it would be a.
Well, I'm getting a sense that we have filled your plate quite well this year. So
Yes.
I was wondering if you need another plate, are you gonna divvy that up, or just as catch can after the enforcement piece?
We would divvy that up. I mean, I think that we'd be in a particularly good position for me to be able to supervise the litigation on any enforcement efforts on the vacant property registration effort. And the going to court, because those are areas, land use enforcement and litigation is something that I've been doing for a very long time. So I think being able to distribute that work would be, we're pretty well set up with the people we have now to be able to administer the additional work that keeps coming in to the legal department.
I know the legal updates have been more frequent, which is helpful for us as a council to what is out there that's in litigation, what are you working on, where are we at? So to continue that would be helpful as well. All right, any other questions? No.
Okay.
All right, so next up, we're gonna move on to the executive tab.
Hey, Courtney O'Donnell, Assistant City Manager. All right. So the executive, This budget incorporates not only the city manager's budget, but also a number of internal services divisions as well. And so it is approximately 16 positions. And as you all know, the city manager's office is kept quite busy, whether that is facilitating council priorities and ordinances and other things that come down through your actions, but also communications to the public. Of course, Carolyn, as the city manager, oversees all the other departments. And so that's the executive department in a nutshell. A little bit about the divisions under executive include central services, which is our in-house print shop. As well as IT, which is new this year. It formerly was in finance and is now under executive, as well as risk and safety. So that covers things like workers' comp, safety and training, as well as insurance. And then human resources as well, which also encompasses labor, as well as employee relations, from everything from benefits to orientation and training, as well as investigations and things like that.
Should introduce our friends from the executive.
Oh, sure.
Here.
Yeah. So in the audience is Rich Cromwell, our HR director, newly appointed. So that's very exciting. As well as Walter Ryan, our print shop foreman, as well, and Jeff Courtney, our director of IT. And they are prepared to come to the table and answer specific questions if needed. But so we thank them for taking the time to come here tonight. And so some goals and priorities for the executive office, I think high on our priority list is communications, especially as it relates to public facing. And I think Manager Lear also would like to formalize an actual communications plan as well. And we actually restructured a little bit within the city manager's office. So we have separated Dave Warren, our formerly administrative and communications manager, to just focus on communications. And we recently hired an office manager to take on all of the administrative duties of the office. So hopefully separating that out actually better facilitates moving in that direction to formalize a more strategic communications plan moving forward. We're also evaluating organizational structure. I think that's actually reflected a little bit in the budget as well, especially with the new program requests and things like that. But I think the biggest piece of this, and I think this was touched on in a previous meeting, has to do with technology. So as you all know, in previous budget cycles, we had requested funding for a HRIS system, also called the Human Resources Information System. As you know, we have over 600 employees, 13 collective bargaining units, but we do not have an actual system where people can go in, employees, and actually look at their benefits and their paycheck and, see what trainings they need to do and things like that. It's all still pretty heavily paper-based. The other side of that is our financial system. Of course, that is toward end of life as well and really needs to be replaced. And that kind of led to the conversation around a more robust sort of technology system that could do more of an ERP level, so enterprise resource system, where it might do the financial, but also HRIS, potentially asset management and other features, depending on our needs. And so I think that's a high priority for the executive office over the next fiscal year. Other than that, HR continues to chip away with updating personnel rules and regs and things like that. They'll obviously them and IT will play a really big part in that technology system and implementing that. And risk and safety, actually, we just last August, we hired a new risk and safety manager. And he's been with us about 8 or 9 months, and he's really gotten his feet under him and is doing really well in that role. So that's fantastic. Other than that, I'm happy to answer questions, but I can move on to the new program requests, if that makes sense. Yeah, please.
The HRS
Yeah.
system, would that help with payroll as well?
Yes. Yes, it would, and timekeeping and all sorts of lovely things.
And data, I mean, I think
Yes.
there are lots of times where we wish we had really quality data to delve into various personnel, internal type questions and.
Right.
A system like that would help as well. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so the first three new program request forms in your book are related to essential services. Two of them are pieces of equipment. The first is a flatbed die cutter. The cost is $35,000. And the other is a wide format eco printer with a cost of $15,000. And the third is actually, it's called a Print MIS system, and that's a replacement of existing software. So these three items are, right now, Central Services has to outsource a number of print jobs. And so purchasing, these pieces of equipment would allow them to bring that back in-house, which would see future savings. It would take a few years to see those savings, but the life of the equipment exceeds that. And overall, the cost is fairly minimal. I should mention, actually, it's not just the city that utilizes Central Services, it's also school department. So Walter is very busy during election season for Lisa in particular, but also back to school season for the school department as well. And he has some pretty cool things that he's able to do. In fact, a lot of the signage here on the first floor was made by Walter. All the signage directing folks that stick to the wall, that was all made in-house. So it's very convenient. He has a fast turnaround time. He also can help with design and things like that as well, particularly for areas that might not have somebody assigned in their area that can do that stuff. So
You can print your budget books.
yes, very
Morning
quickly
of.
and efficiently. Yes. And so that's the first three. The other two are for IT. I'm sorry, there's one more after that, but I'll let Carolyn mention that one. The next two are for IT specifically. So actually, let me just ask, is there anything around Central Services you have questions about or anything? Yeah.
So on the first one for the die cutter,
Yep.
this says 6,000 and 10,000 each year. Is that just the invoice cost? I wonder if you're also saving on someone having to go pick it up, if there's a misprint, the quality control, having to go back and do it. So I'm wondering if is that all you're saving, or you would save it even more than that?
Sorry, Walter will come up to the table. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer that question for you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Walter Ryan, Central Services. So if you would repeat that, since I had final share.
So I was looking, the savings of 6,000 and 10,000 each year. I'm just wondering if that's just the invoice, like what we pay out, or does it also factor in someone from the staff has to go pick it up? If they misprint it, we have to go back. Like, is staff time also calculated in that 6,000 to 10,000 that we're saving?
Some of it is because some of you already know I'm the only one in that position. There is nobody helping me. So yes, this will definitely help me in that as well. This is also looking at the fact of like special stocks that I have to order, like folder stocks that we use for the first aid packets for the school department, any of the boxes we use for your business cards, your letterheads. Those will be able to be made in-house too. So we're actually eliminating some of the stocks and getting the core substrate basically to come inside. And that machine will be able to handle all of that. It will also be able to help mailings like we've done in the past for like the airport. The airport had a special cargo thing about 6 or 8 years ago, I believe it was. And that die cut actually costs extra money on its own, and we only used it once, and I think that was like $200 or $300, and then we still had to have somebody outside do that. This machine would also eliminate the cost of any die cuts that we would have to buy because it's all software driven.
So this will pay for itself. And then on the software, is it the 8,000 to set up? That's just the one-time cost, and then
To set it up,
To set it up.
yes.
Okay. And then it looks like staff time will be saved, so that'll pay for itself. And then for the last one, I think it's kind of the same kind of question, the 5,000 to 7,000 saving each year, invoice cost versus it's clear that, like, to me, the quality control, having that in house is a big piece. save the time it saves staff, you.
Yes.
And but also improves the turnaround time and again, pays for itself, so.
Correct, and there'll be it also, not just on that turnaround, like in some of the things that she was talking about, the signs that are inside. Some of the other signs that we've done were actually for elections, so any of the election signs that you see outside that have the nice red and white, blue, and has the paneling in the background, that was all printed by me and working in conjunction with our sign shop. The problem is that substrate that we used, if we were to leave it out 24/7, because of the type of printer we have right now, direct sun, it would have disappeared in about 4 months. But because it's only being used for elections, we're getting 6, 8, 10 years out of it. So with the eco printer, we're actually gonna have a UV resistant ink, which will make everything last longer. And then in cases like those signs, when we add a UV resistant laminate on top of it, it will double, if not triple, the lifetime of our signs.
No complaints from me.
Really helpful when they're outside.
Council Carson.
I'm curious on the dichotomy of the life of a piece of equipment, what that looks like. And the typical maintenance costs over the life.
The lifespan right now, as it has been shown to me, is about 15 to 20 years. I've had machines last actually longer than that currently in the shop, like our mail inserter, which actually outlived the manufacturer of the machine. The maintenance on that side, most of it can be handled in-house by me. It would come down to like the wear and tear items like the perf and the scoring blades that would be needed. And that's kind of minimal. You're only looking at, depending on the workload, anywhere between $200 to $500 every couple of years.
Other questions?
Thank you, Walt.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. I should have mentioned Walt's a longtime employee. How long have you worked in the print shop? Well, you have to come back this way though.
I've been with the city for just about 23 years now. And I've been in the printing industry since 1992.
Yeah. Walt is one of the most passionate city employees. I think I know. He really does a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so moving on, the other two new program requests are for two additional positions in IT. So right now, we have the IT director, Jeff Courtney, and then he has 5 IT staff that support the entire city. There's a dedicated tech for airport, as well as a tech that's based in City Hall that kind of pinch hits for the rest of the departments, and public safety shares one as well. And then there's a database administrator and network administrator. I was so close. And so these 2 new positions, in fact, I'm just gonna have Jeff Courtney, the IT director, come up preemptively. They're for cybersecurity analyst and a cloud security analyst. As you might imagine, like the cybersecurity in particular, is becoming a really big issue, particularly with our airport. There's a lot of directives coming down through that eat up a lot of staff resources and time to make sure that we're in compliance and that that we are safe, if you will, and secure on the cyber side. Cloud security, I think is kind of similar, right?
It is in a lot of ways. A lot of our environment is switching to the cloud. We're using a lot of Microsoft Office 365, Adobe, a lot of our backups, a lot of things are put out into the cloud, and it eats up a lot of staff time managing that, keeping it safe. And that eliminates the need for us to kind of work in other areas and help other departments.
So I think this would not only help offset like the current need, but it will also help us be more proactive moving forward in regard to where we're at and where we need to go. So.
Councilor.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say that that proactive piece is actually very important because so much is going to change very soon across any type of conversation regarding information technology securities. So securing our data is one of the most important things I think we can do as a city right now, especially when we don't know what's going to come down the pipeline with future evolutions of technologies. I'll just leave it at that for right now. But no, I don't need any convincing on these two positions. They're absolutely necessary.
I would encourage you to ask a couple of department heads if they think they need additional IT support as well, because I think it's a famine situation right now as far as, you know, if there are adequate IT services.
Yeah, I would argue.
Not because Jeff is doing a bad job. The need is so high.
Yeah, we have 5 staff members that support, we have 620 computer users that have the ability to log into a city system. And we support almost 500 PCs, mobile PCs, tablets, phones, devices that staff needs to do their job.
Right, not to mention the various projects and things that, you know, each department and their specific needs rely on IT support for as well. And again, especially with rolling out like new citywide technology, IT is going to be heavily involved in that project as well.
Councilor Mello, you have a question, and then Councilor Dean.
Well, the only question I had was, I noticed the airport is using a lot of the services. Is that do we get support from them through billing or what?
Yeah, so actually the dedicated tech is actually paid for by the airport for them. That is true, yes. And then there's overhead as well that's billed to the airport. So yes,
So
that's
it's
a good
not-
question.
The cost really isn't 129 to the city because part of it's coming out of the air. Is that correct?
I'm gonna let you answer that.
That's a can of worms. So the way that we apply so we do charge the airport and the other enterprise funds a fee for sort of administrative services, HR, IT, finance, our time, via a formula called the ICAP formula, and I could not tell you what the acronym off the top of my head stands for. We really need to update the ICAP formula. It has not been updated for quite some time. And so, yes, in theory, the airport pays their portion, but until we update that formula to incorporate new positions, they would not.
Well, now is not this the time, if this is gonna be specific to the airport, to just assign the amount to them?
These positions will not be specific to the airport.
Right. There is a dedicated tech to the airport, but these positions are separate from that.
But a portion of it. Well, that's fine, I guess, I've confused the issue now.
Oh,
It is a high priority for me to update the formula. I will say that. I think we need to have that updated to reflect
yeah.
city costs. It will not be a small or easy task, however, it will be very complex.
Right, and you are right, Council Mallor, in that certainly, like, I mean, we say it right in this new program request for the cloud security analysts that, you know, that they would be assisting like the airport, even wastewater, which of course, both of those are enterprise accounts. So to Manager Lear's point, yeah, we definitely need to relook at that, make sure.
I might be able to help a little bit with some of that clarification. A lot of the time, the airport tech will reach out to like our network administrator saying, I need to have this gate to have computer access. So he wouldn't be able to do that. The tech would call a network operations person and he would take care of that change. And I envision the same thing happening with like the cyber. If he has a need for cyber access, he would reach out to staff here to help and assist him in doing that task.
I'm not concerned about that, I'm more concerned about the fact that they make more money than we do and they can afford to pay more.
Yeah. I knew where you were going with that. Yeah.
Counselor Bean.
Yes, my question, I think we discussed this at a prior meeting, but is there any way to combine the two positions into one, at least for a year or two to keep the budget down, or they definitely separate positions?
A great question. I didn't really think about it in that regard. Certainly, we could. We do a lot of cross training with our staff so that, you know, the network person can do database and vice versa. I think in the short term, we probably could. In the near future, maybe a year or two, we would have to go separate those just because things are gonna be changing so quickly and rapidly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we talked about, you know, servicing department heads in that regard. Talk to us a little bit about the cybersecurity piece of it. Have we been seeing an increase in attacks and also what kind of risks are we facing if we're not adequately staffed and being proactive about our security?
Yeah, we see almost 100,000 cyber incidents, you know, attacks on our network a day. It's staggering. Back in 2021, TSA really got us prompting to look at cybersecurity. They came up with basically an incident response plan that we had to have by 2024. So the airport worked with a consultant. We worked with the consultant to come up with this incident response plan. And that's a template that we've been using that we're going to roll out to the rest of the city as we start to look at areas of infrastructure like wastewater treatment, public safety, community transit. All those things are going to be looked at. But in 2024, we completed that plan. We submitted it to the TSA. We had a passing grade. But since then, we've done a tabletop exercise. We've done a penetration test where we hire a firm to kind of attack our network and look where our vulnerabilities are, both internally and externally. And then we're looking at, again, we have another audit coming through for the TSA in June of this year. And I envision that the results from that will kind of lead us into where we're going to go for the other areas in the city. We've also been working with MMA and a company called Google Mandiant, who's been helping us to look at smaller communities, basically communities less than 30,000 or under 50,000. And they've been working with us, and we've got a meeting next week with them to come up with an incident response plan for a municipality, not necessarily an airport or something like that. So we've been working with the MMA with that and a company called Google Mandiant who does it all across the country. And their hope is by the end of the summer that we're going to have this incident response plan that we can roll out not only to the state and MMA that they can use for other municipalities, but they can use it in the country, throughout the country with Google as a partner with it.
Okay. I had attended an MMA conference and they put us through some emergency scenarios, and the one I got handed was you've got, you know, these three, you know, scenarios happen with the flood, the weather, and then by the way, you got hacked and there's a ransomware and you're completely locked out of your system. And I said, that's preposterous. And they're like, no, actually it happened here, and here. And now it's like, that's what makes me lose sleep at night of, I guess I'd rather pay 129,000 to get somebody rather than multi-millions to be able to get back into our systems. So.
Yeah, we have a piece of software right now that we have one of our analysts look at every morning to kind of look at where we've had attacks, where we're getting, you know, hits from throughout the world and how we can shut those off and gets notifications and emails. It's at least once a week that we have to do some sort of plan to shift things around and shut things off. It's staggering the number of things that are out there.
Yeah, the other piece too around tech is, you know, technology is evolving at such a rapid pace now more than ever, and just trying to keep up with that and also deal with the day-to-day needs of the airport. Like somebody's computer's not working, right? Like that prevents them from working. So IT needs to respond quickly. Meanwhile, they're doing all this other work on the back end too. And so definitely, to Jeff's earlier point, should we combine them? Yes, and certainly we will. That's what we're directed to do. But it would be a short-term sort of progress, and we would be back again asking for that additional full-time position. Just so, again, we can get back to be more proactive instead of reactive in various ways.
If you don't combine them though, or even if you do combine them, your workload is going to increase regardless, because you're the only one that's gonna have knowledge on everything else, so other things are gonna go unnoticed or untouched for several days, maybe, if we have just a combined position. And to me, from what I know about cloud security and cybersecurity, I think that's really a lot to put into one position and expect to have good coverage for that. So I would be in favor of the two positions separately, but yes, Councilor.
Just to piggyback off of that as well. I'm sorry to give you bad news, but it's very likely if we were to put both of those positions forward, they would almost certainly be wearing two hats very soon in the future anyway. So I think this actually is gonna help us in the long run more than anything. Yeah, great.
And, oh, sorry, happy to answer any other questions.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, I have another question. Just for cost saving, as far as the city's concerned, seems to me the logic would be to make one of the decisions fully to the airport.
Noted. Also, I would be remiss not to mention that Jeff is also a longtime city employee, and he does a great job. In fact, he kind of undersold MMA piece a little bit. In fact, he was reached out to as kind of an expert in that area because he and his team had kind of been more forward through that airport process and is more cutting edge, if you will, in comparison to a lot of other municipalities in Maine. So we have a good team.
Trying to fly under the radar. If you don't notice us, we're doing our job.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, actually, I would argue that's internal services in general. But yeah.
Any other questions before we move on?
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then the last one, I'm gonna turn over to Manager Lear.
So, the final position that you have in your packet under the executive department is an emergency manager role. And you also have a somewhat lengthy memo in your budget packet. I will take no credit for that memo, even though my name is at the top of it. It was primarily the work product of Chief Lowe. I would say when I joined the city, one of the first conversations I had with Jeff was, all right, walk me through our emergency management plan. When are we gonna schedule tabletop exercises? You know, where's our alternative location if City Hall goes down? Where do we move our operations? What are our top 10 critical, must perform functions for the city? And I think because up to this point, emergency management has been a corollary duty to our fire chief. He has struggled to manage the focus required to have an effective fire department and a happy staff there, fulfilled, trained, managed staff, while concurrently managing the emergency response functions and responsibilities for what is a pretty complex city. Although 30,000, 32,000 isn't enormous as cities go. We have 2 major event venues. We have the most important medical facility for the northern half of the state. We have a railroad, we have an airport. And so from an emergency management perspective, we are a pretty complex city. And Councilor Beck, you said IT keeps you up at night. This is what keeps me up at night, is the possibility of some sort of major event happening within the city and not having the clearest, most effective response. We certainly had some emergencies recently, primarily at the airport, but that was a pretty self-contained incident. Something much broader within the city, either geographically or with the number of individuals impacted. I don't get the warm and fuzzy feelings about our level of preparedness for something like that. We would get through it and we would do what we had to do, But I would feel better if we had someone within the city who their responsibility was to make sure that we were prepared for emergency situations. I think another challenge with emergency management is that, I've started to delve into some of the mandatory emergency management trainings that I have to take as city manager. And it's very clear that one of the primary tenets of emergency management is having a very clear leader in that scenario. And because emergency management lives with the fire chief, who is a peer to many of the other responding agencies, police, airport, public health. I think there are also some structural challenges with the fact that we have emergency management led by the fire chief. Were we to hire an emergency manager, that position would report directly to me as opposed to being a peer of the other department heads. I guess with that, I would be happy to answer questions. However, I would like to engage in this conversation again when we talk about the fire chief's budget and have him here. Because a lot of the technical analysis that you had in that memo is really something that he's expert in. And I'm sort of relying on his expertise in bringing this recommendation to you. But if it were to be approved, it would live in the city manager's budget.
I was just gonna say really quickly that thank you for mentioning that with the second conversation with Chief Lowe, because I would very much like to hear his perspective on this as well, because you can obviously make the case that after two pretty major plane crashes and of course the complexity of our city as well, like the need obviously is there. To echo what Councilor Beck said earlier, but we do have to sell this stuff as well. And so not everyone usually sees safety and security as a thing, like where's my return on investment for being safe or having an emergency response? So I guess that's the only thing that I would say with the upcoming conversation is definitely be prepared to showcase like what happens when we don't have an emergency coordinator or manager, I'm sorry. And what happens in a scenario, a very likely that we could face as a city, especially due to all the varying things that we're dealing with right now in these tumultuous times. So that's all I would really say is I'm looking forward to that next conversation because I would have more questions I would want to ask as well.
Councilor Dean.
Yes, I think this is an extremely important position, but I'm also looking at Bangor as a service center. And I think the other communities are gonna look to Bangor. And if we have this position, I believe it would be utilized by more than just Bangor. Do we have any way to perhaps bring down the cost with any federal funding, state funding, community involvement, at least maybe the Penobscot County? I just think that this is much more far reaching than just Bangor. And once again, we're going to be picking up the cost for everything.
Agreed. And I sort of debated bringing this one forward to you this budget year. But I thought it was good to talk about regardless of whether it gets funded or not. I think it's really a really important conversation. One of the reasons that I didn't bring it forward is because I do feel like, or I know that there's a ton of grant funding available in this space for emergency response operations, both from the feds and from the state level. We haven't gotten to the point yet of having a good understanding of if we were to stand up this position, is there any way we could cover salaries and benefits in total or in part with grant funding? So more work to do there. And I actually think Chief Lowe is sort of doing more research on that as we speak.
Councilor Carson.
I want to express, this is when people talk about, I'm with you, this is what keeps me up at night as a city. Thinking about, I mean, there's hundreds of things that could happen that involve multiple residents that require an emergency response plan. And I think, I mean, it's not just a position like this that can dive into that, but we really need that expert to help us to determine if our policy environment supports an appropriate emergency response plan. I mean, there's tons of conversations I can think of, and I think probably lots of examples across the country in my lifetime of failed responses from governments at all level in emergencies. Hurricane Katrina comes to mind. We dream about that a lot. But even to the point, like we don't even have, I think, data available on what would happen in scenarios if we lost taxable property. If we have a giant flood and we permanently lose property, what does that do to our base? What does that do to our finances? And that's often a huge piece that cities miss when they're preparing for emergencies or trying to recover from them. So I mean, I can see a million benefits to something like this, but I also, to Councillor Dean's point, agree that this would be something that would be utilized by multiple communities.
Councilor Miller and then Councilor Beck.
The question I have is, what services of this type does the county provide?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an emergency situation, we would call upon the county. I think we should talk about this more with Jeff Lowe so you can hear it from the horse's mouth. But I think Jeff would say that they are probably most equipped to respond to the smaller communities and probably haven't established a level of preparedness to respond to a Bangor City major issue, and that we would probably instead be relying upon the state emergency management agency.
Could we work with the state, or does it have to go through the county?
That's a good
What's the step?
question, yeah.
And the other thing is, I believe the county is the one that does all the contracts for mutual aid for the fire departments. I don't believe there's a mutual aid contract for EMS countywide.
Interesting. Also a good Jeff question.
I like the conversation, find a way to share the cost regionally.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense, but also I think about too, is that this is a position I don't think we've had in Bangor. And I wonder about, we run into a lot of institutional memory issues.
Yeah.
And this is something we'd have to continue to pay for each year with this one
Yes.
person. Eventually they get poached by another community and the door goes. And I'm wondering, and this may be a chief question, but an alternative, at least in the meantime, is about getting a consultant that specializes in this and help us create in a case of emergency, break the glass kind of thing, that God forbid we have a situation that we can at least, crack open and say, okay, here's the steps to get you started, in some scenarios. I don't know what that would cost, but at least it would be a living document, but at least be something that we would hold on to, that whether we have this position or not, at least, we have a starting place on these things.
We do have an emergency plan. It's probably this thick. I think the challenge is, once created, it does need to be a living document. And so you do have to be continually updating it. And you do have to have someone who's responsible for organizing exercises and offering trainings when new staff come on. I think that's the missing piece there, that there's no one who has the bandwidth to carry what we have in such a way that it's an actually useful, informative tool.
It appears that Chief Lowe is really, we're fortunate that we have him at this time when you're needing to look at this plan, because he's done a lot of that in his other positions, and he teaches, and he's well versed in emergency management, so we should be able to get a good problem.
So more to come on that when he joins us. He'll be very excited to talk.
Oh, yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, I guess we wanted to talk council budget quickly. Is that? Yes.
Oh, right, because that's in governance, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the council budget is, it's pretty minimal. as you know. And it largely covers. Yeah, and so, it encompasses things like, for two counselors to go to NLC. It also allows for various trainings for you guys to take advantage of, both in state, and online as well, based on interest. One thing we did want to chat about was food, I think.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we purchase a very small amount of food for council meeting nights. And currently the vast majority of that food becomes several employees' lunches the following day. And so we were interested in gauging your interest in discontinuing the process of purchasing pizza or sandwiches, instead going to sort of snacks, prepackaged snacks, crackers, chips, nuts, those sorts of things. Just, it will not reduce the tax rate a meaningful amount, unfortunately, but it will be saved money.
For a very long time, it's been talked about for that same thing, year after year after year. We have the food on council night, we run out of time, you've got maybe 5 minutes down, food doesn't get touched. And it's not just this council, it's many behind us, and there's people up there going, they saw it as well. So if it's just being purchased to, no offense, but buy lunch for the staff the next day, I'm not sure that's what is being, it's not being used usefully, so.
And I would just add to that, we would always, like actually make sure, I've noticed like committee nights are going longer too, so, we have, a little snack, area out back too, in case somebody's feeling like really peckish and needs food. But the question is to Counselor Hawes' point is whether or not you need like a full meal on council nights.
I'd be happy with snacks.
Yeah,
There are times you
I
really
don't think
do
we
need
need the
something.
full.
Yeah.
You know, worked all day and you're rushing here, you've had nothing to eat, you go late, it
Yep.
can be a lot.
Now, on council orientations, that's different.
Yes, we'll still.
Yes.
That has always been used, eaten, and appreciated because it's a longer session, but
Right.
just for a council meeting, an awful lot goes to waste. Yeah.
So actually, that would allow us to, I think, pretty much keep the city council budget flat. Which is good.
We like flat budgets. We like those flat budgets.
All right.
Alright, I actually, despite the fact that Stephanie is not here, just to keep things moving, I'm gonna go through the finance budget. So the accomplishments for finance primarily are filling all of the vacant positions that have existed within finance. Finance right at this moment is fully staffed. I was actually looking at the roster of staff though, and there is only one person in the finance department that was here about a year ago. So that's a lot of staff turnover. That's a loss of a lot of institutional knowledge. That's a lot of training happening. And as a result, I will be blunt and transparent. We are not seeing the progress that we hoped we would in all of the catch-up work that has needed to happen due to those many, many years of understaffing. The goals all remain the same, catching up on the audit and becoming more timely, improving the procurement process to be more modern and efficient, providing you all better, more frequent and timely financial information so that you can monitor city operations. But progress has been slow for those reasons. For the finance budget, the finances budget is driven by the things that we've already talked about. It's wages, it's health insurance. Finances, because of all that turnover and because when you hire people, you typically hire them at a lower salary level than the tenured person who's left actually hasn't seen the increase in wages that you might expect. But they are still seeing an increase due to all of those factors. But we are asking for a new position in finance. And I would put this much like the positions that Lisa talked about. This is something that we need just to provide the baseline of what you expect of us in the finance department. So in the finance department, there is a director and deputy director. There's someone who's responsible for payroll. There's someone who's responsible for the procurement process. There's a clerk. And then there is one staff accountant. That is the one person who has been here for longer than a year. And you would not have this budget book if she was not here. Because she was the only person who had the institutional knowledge and experience to get us through the budget process. I would probably faint if I knew how many hours of overtime she worked to make this budget book happen. And we need one more of her. We need one more of her so she doesn't have to work overtime, 12 months out of the year to perform the basic financial functions of the city. But also from a continuity of operations standpoint, we need overlap because that position is truly critical to the budget process and the financial audit process. So that's my pitch for that position.
Questions, Councilwoman?
I would be supportive of that position. I do have a general follow-up question
Yeah.
for finance. I swear I will not bring up artificial intelligence throughout the entire budget process. I know that finance in particular is something that is very much creeping into finance as a whole, being utilized as unfortunately replacing employees as well in other departments. And I want to be very clear, that's not what I'm recommending at all. Can't replace a human with AI. I do have thoughts on how much of the finance department right now is of the understanding that artificial intelligence really is creeping into finances as a whole, and how much of that is how much of an individual person's in finances time is being used to better get to know or even be trained on these potential tricks and trades of what financing can be with the assistance of a AI helper.
I'm gonna be a little bit glib. Our folks aren't thinking about AI because they're essentially using an abacus to do their work. So I think a fundamental component of the conversation for a new finance and HRIS system is, are there functions and tools within that system that will help staff leverage AI in a responsible way to do their work more efficiently? We don't even have the tools to do that now because we're operating a system that's end of life that was built decades ago. So no, they're not thinking about it or using it.
That's okay.
I think undoubtedly the products that are on the market today are coming standard with responsible AI capabilities. And so a new product will inevitably force staff to start thinking about learning and using those tools.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding correctly, one of the big reasons for having this additional finance department has just been gutted.
Yeah.
And institutional memory just doesn't exist, and no matter how many people you try to put together at it, if we don't have the full source of knowledge, it's just not gonna get done any faster. My question is this, is one, with us getting new software, does this also result in system changes where we can retain institutional memory, whether it's, it doesn't walk out the door every time?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you were to sit down next to Stephanie or another member of finance, the number of workarounds that they have to perform and have to know to perform to operate effectively in our current system is astounding. And it's inefficient. It takes them more time because they have to do these workarounds. But it's also not recreatable. And so when a finance director leaves with all the knowledge of how to operate within the system effectively, it's a struggle for someone like Stephanie to sit down at the computer and say, okay, I need this information. I should be able to click here and get it. But you have to know, well, actually you have to go here, add this line to this line and do some math to get the real answer.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
And my other question then would be, being that our challenges are what they are right now, do you see this as a temporary addition? Where eventually we would be able to downsize that position in the future once we're in a place where, we've got the software, we're happy with where it's at, turnover doesn't hurt us as bad. But would we ever be able to contract?
It's hard to know because we are so far, in my opinion, we are so far at this moment from providing the baseline of what we should be in a timely fashion that it feels wild to even consider that we'd be in a place where we would be shedding a position in finance. We would be years away from that for sure.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is because, again, challenges with selling this to the public. I'm talking to folks who remind me, hey, we were the same population in 1960 and they were able to do it with slide rules and IBM calculators. So why are we having to hire all these people to do essentially the same thing? And I'm not in that department and I don't get to see all of the hard work, and it is hard work. Just look in this budget book, I know it's hard work. So it's like the more information too, as we go along, that we can really paint the picture to the taxpayer of this, which is a great picture to show them of, we really got hurt by turnover. It really hurt us, and to be able to function at that level, it's do this or we're just going to continue to get farther and farther and farther behind the ball here.
Yeah, and I think the item I would add is I think we are on a trajectory where the public expects more information and transparency. And I don't know that that was necessarily true 30 years ago. And then concurrently, the complexity of the transactions and the number of transactions that they're monitoring through the finance department is pretty high, I think, compared to prior years. Not last year, but 30 years ago. And then the accounting standards and the audit standards that they're subject to on the back end have also only grown in complexity and sophistication.
Let me ask this follow-up, because also I would imagine that a lot of the additional duties, again, using that comparison before, there's a lot of new state mandated things that we have to do. And to that end, now that we have a legislative committee, I think maybe as we go along, is that if we can identify
Yes.
those kind of things of, hey, these are things the state heaps on us, to be able to push for some kind of legislation. Is there a way to get additional reimbursements and things?
Yeah, I think communicating the impact of unfunded mandates could be a fundamental yearly task of the legislative committee for sure.
No, I'm basically answered the question, but I'm in agreement that it'd be nice to think we could get rid of that for a few years, but if we don't accomplish that, we can't. But I think with new software or a new program, you're gonna find a lot of new efficiencies.
I sure hope so.
Any other questions?
All right, next on the list is other agencies. And for the most part, I actually think we are going to defer much of this conversation to other departments because they're the experts in the topics. The items on the other tab that I would highlight are the first line, debt service. You will see that we are projecting an increase to debt service. Very shortly after we get through this budget process, you are going to see a package of bonds come through to approve. These will all be bonds that you previously authorized in the budget that we're now gonna go out and actually go to bond for. And so this number is increasing in anticipation of actually going out to bond for those amounts. So that's why that is increasing. We will talk about most of these other lines, citywide dues. These are our dues to MMA, and then we also are members in the Service Center Coalition, Maine Service Center Coalition. And there is a hired lobbyist who lobbies for that group on our behalf, as well as the other service center communities in Maine. And then we are also a member of the Maine Mayor's Coalition, which is an even smaller group of the larger cities that have mayors. Although Belfast doesn't participate, it's occurred to me, and they have a mayor. We will talk about the Cultural Commission, Tourism and Marketing, the Snowmobile Club, all in other departments. But I would like to highlight the bottom line for you. That's where you'll see the increase in the amount of county taxes that we will collect. When that tax increase was first sort of discussed, I think we were estimating about $1 million impact to Bangor. It was slightly less. I believe it was 911,000 is how much we will raise additionally from Bangor taxpayers. I'm gonna note here, but we should probably defer the substantive conversation to the end of the budget process when we have sort of firmer numbers. I think there is a place to talk about the use of unassigned fund balance to offset some of that impact. You know, I'm really hesitant because I think things like unassigned fund balance, the general idea is you use one-time money to pay for one-time expenses. And I don't know that we truly believe that this is a one-time expense coming from county taxes, but we're projecting right now, and there's a chart in the front of your book talking about that, being in a pretty healthy position as it relates to the unassigned fund balance. And so I just think we should, in the back of our minds, think about how we want to use that in a way to reduce the tax burden.
Not to get into the weeds about the county tax thing, but at some point I want to put this in everyone's ear. I'd like to start talking to our fellow communities and talk about how do we bring them back in line? You know, this idea that, you know, their budget can get that out of whack because of, you know, surpluses running out, and, you know, between the budget committee that they had asking them to make more cuts, and they just kind of blew that off. You know, we're all hurting here, and there's just no accountability for it. And I feel like we have no voice in it. And I know we're not the only community upset about this. And, you know, I'm sure we can, you know, invite the commissioners to come meet with us. They won't show up. But there needs to be some kind of public reckoning for this, because, you know, what was it, 16 point, in front of the, whatever the, I mean, it was a huge increase, you know, with all the problems they're having and then their own budgeting issues. And it just gets kicked to us. You know, we're drowning here, and, you know, we can take on a lot of issues for the county, and then to have to pay that increased tax on top of it. You know, so I would like to see us get more vocal about it and carry that to the county.
Councilor Carson.
Just point out that I think the order for the legislative committee includes language that's broad enough that it would have the authority to do that liaising. If that was of the committee's interest.
So if there aren't any other questions, I think we're to our final section, which is the Bangor Public Library. So I will invite Ben Treat to the table.
Thank you. Save the most exciting part for last, I get it. Oh,
It is on the other tab.
The other.
And then, in your packet for today, the library did provide a couple of pages.
Well, I want to start with good news. I always like to talk about what's exciting at the library. So I just got news today that I can't say who it's going to be, but we have somebody really big coming to the Bangor Book Festival in December. So I don't want to steal the thunder of the nonprofit that co-manages that with us, but it's somebody who has local connections, but also national recognition. TV programs that have been developed from their work. It's going to be a big draw. And the reason I mentioned that start is first, I heard it today. And second, when you look at, I think it's page 4 of the document, you see the rising number of people. I have a double check the page number, but you see a rising number of well, it's much later, it's page 5, yeah. The rising number of people actually attending the library, and those numbers don't go up just because of day-to-day use going up. The big push there is that we have lots of events that are bringing lots and lots of people into the library on a regular basis. So if you look at those numbers and say, well, what's driving that? What's happening there? It's not just that we're seeing small increases each year in the number of people who come day by day, but we're also seeing huge increases in the people who come for major events. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do now is I think the way to say it is look big, right? We want to actually look like we're as big as we are and have a big presence for people so they feel excited about all the things that we have to offer. We want people really enthusiastic about coming out for arts, culture, science programming, all of the different kinds of programs we have. So that's a big emphasis we have right now is trying to get people out for major events, but also then bring them back through. Another thing that we do that's big is we have a lot of people who get library cards who are regional, not just in Bangor. And the goal there is to get them to come back into downtown Bangor for events, right? So they might get a card because they commute and they want to have downloadable audiobooks. And if you don't already have a card and aren't using downloadable audiobooks, you ought to be doing it. It's great. Unless you don't like downloadable audiobooks, and then just forget that I said that. But but seriously, like that person who gets the card so that they can do downloadable audiobooks also gets our newsletter, and they find out, oh, so-and-so is coming at this event in December, and then they're in downtown Bangor on a weekend in December, and maybe that's where they're doing some of their Christmas shopping. And so that's part of the goal that we have is to keep looping people back in, get them for the audiobooks and bring them back in December, get them for the December event and then get them to get a library card so that they keep getting the newsletters. So our numbers show that we're getting that energy, we're getting that attendance. It's at all levels of the organization too, in terms of age level. Our teen programming has doubled over the past couple of years compared to previous times and pre-COVID times even. So we're seeing people of all ages and with all kinds of purposes coming into the library. So there's lots of good news. The part of how we have the goal of looking big is grant funding, right? It doesn't make sense for us to come and plan out a year's worth of programs and then ask you to pay the bill for that. That's not what we do. We're looking for the basic nuts and bolts funding to keep the library operating, along with other revenue sources like the State Area Reference and Resource Center money, the draw from our endowment, annual giving that's more than $100,000 that we receive from gifts of like $25 to $2,000, like it's all over the board. Aside from all of that, those revenue sources, we also go out and seek grant funding. And the reason that we're doing that, and you wouldn't see that on an operating budget report, it's because we don't put it in the operating budget. We seek the grant funding so we can do the program, and then it's money that was given for a specific purpose, so it shows up differently, not as typical operating budget. we've received so far this year more than, and this is the last page of the report that I've given you, more than $20,000 in grants, 13,000 of which came from the Friends of the Bangor Public Library. So if you're enthusiastic about supporting the library in more ways than just this budget meeting, then the Friends of the Library is a great organization to be involved with. But that's not quite half. The funding, we received 5,000 from Maine Savings for STEAM programming, 3,000 from Bangor Savings Bank for Stay Faith for Teens. We have lots of different grant funding that we have for both day-to-day expansion of what we can offer in the library, but also big programming and programming that brings lots of people in. So that's all the good news. And it's not all the good news. It's a bunch of good news anyway. But what's driving the budget, right? So one thing is that when we have a budget surplus, as we did for several years because of federal grant programs or federal funding programs like the PPP loans that we were able to receive, but you all weren't in municipal government. We got that, and then we were able to spread that out over multiple years and not ask for money as a result of that. So it showed up as surpluses in multiple years. So there's that. There have been bequests. There have been various ways that we've received surplus cash. And what we've done is you can see on our budget and our audited report that we run an intentional deficit in those years. We intend to have the next year actually running a deficit because we have cash from a previous year that we're spending down. So our goal is not to sit on cash. We should not have, you should have an unassigned funds budget, or I forget the terminology, but that's not really the goal of a nonprofit, to sit on cash. We want to not come back to you the next year asking for a full budget when we actually have cash that we have available to spend. That's not the case this year. We've reached the end of that chain of things. Of having the surplus funds. So that's why you're seeing a steeper, that's one of the reasons you're seeing a steeper increase. As has been discussed, we of course have cost of living increases and everything else. So that's another significant portion of the increase. And then the third part is the social worker position. Now, that was funded. What we did was we applied when the county put out a grant process and said, Scott County, we would like to do this project, and they worked with the city and said, is there a way that we could fund part of it? And the city could fund part of it, and the council chose yes. The city funded about 2/3 of our request, and the county funded about 1/3. And we are now at the end of that process. ARPA funds have to have been spent by American Rescue Plan Act funds have to have been spent by December. We will have hit that target. That's not a problem. But we now need to really take account of whether this is a position that has run its course or whether it's a position that we still need. I believe it's a position we still need. Now you can see in the report that we provided, and we do foreground some of the not so good news. I foregrounded the good news when I got here. Foregrounded some of the not so good news. You can see the first chart on page 2, behavior in the library. Now, red card, you may say, what's a red card? But it's like an informal criminal trespass order. Instead of calling the police and using the police's time for a situation where a person needs to leave the library, but there's no investigative process that needs to happen. We don't need a police presence. We don't need the authority of somebody with a badge. We just need the person to leave the library. We tell them, you need to leave the library and you can't return for a year. And if they continue returning to the library, then we call the police, right? Because that's a person who's flouting our reasonable request to leave the premises. So we've combined those figures because in both cases, it's basically an instance of somebody doing something that means that they can't come back to the library for a year. And you can see that that number has really shot up over time. When I started at the library in 2018, I think we had 2 people on, and now we're usually around 75 or 80 people. So the 27% increase over last year. You also can see a chart on the bottom of that page showing the kinds of misconduct that we see in the library. The blue bars are over the past 12 months, the red bars are over the past 3 months. So you can see it's basically, without regard to season, it's mostly substance related and some threats, verbal abuse and disruptive behavior, a smattering of other things. So we have the problems still. We also have people who come to the library on a regular basis who are unhoused, who are in the bureaucracy of homelessness, right? And we also have new people coming to the library all the time. Some of them end up on this chart as one of the people we end up kicking out, and some of them are looking for help. Some of them are escaping sex trafficking, and the library was the first place they ended up. How we respond in that moment has an impact as a community. It has an impact on whether that person is moving towards a university education and housing, as is the case with one person who came to the library in that situation, or whether that person says, like, nobody believes me, nobody is giving me help. And so that moment when library staff have to figure out how to respond, I want that to be a social worker responding to that and not somebody whose job is to check out books. If we had another location in the city where people were going, that was a public space, they were going all the time, and we had stood that up a year ago, we might be having a different conversation now. I think it would take a year for something like that to have the kind of impact where we wouldn't need Olivia Scott, our social worker, in place. As it stands now, my ability to run the library will be near zero without that position in place. There's nobody else in the library that can do that work besides me. And I'm married to a social worker, but it doesn't have the same impact. You know, I listen to her all the time. I do, and you should, but like, gosh, I still don't know how to do all the things that a social worker knows to do. And so I view that position as vital in order to be able to operate the library and do all the things that we do actually do. All the time that I spend and that my coworkers spend planning all the good stuff that I described early on is stuff that I'm gonna have to say, yeah, we can't do that right now, because I have to figure out ways to manage all of the behavior, all the new faces that are coming into the library. And now we don't even try to divert people into new paths towards diverting back to Phoenix, back to Machias, or diverting to housing, diverting to case management, diverting people out of the library atrium and into the relationship they need to be into, be directed into. So that's the reason for that budget request. It's really, really challenging. The other thing that Olivia does, I mean, one of the many, many things that Olivia does is help staff. This is a very difficult thing for us to have as part of our job, right? And so she helps staff with knowing how to manage those early interactions, knowing how to manage their own emotional response after they Narcan somebody, after they see somebody blue on the floor, after they interact with someone and know that, okay, I got them to Olivia, I know that this is pretty good, that we're able to give somebody a direction, but boy, that was traumatic, right? And so and then also help staff and commiserate with staff about some of the challenges of compassion fatigue. I think after you've Narcaned a lot of people, and sometimes you maybe have Narcaned the same person, even though we've CT'd the person, they slipped in when, you know, the greeter was off dealing with something else and they're on the floor of our bathroom again. It's really easy to slip into compassion fatigue. And that's a situation where it really helps to have somebody whose training is in this area, as opposed to me where my training's in like novels and stuff. So the work of the social worker is really, really important. And I don't know what we would do without her. So that's why I've put her in the budget. That said, if let's say 5 years from now, 1 year from now, magic wand territory, everybody's housed, everybody is, you know, there's a place for people to go 24/7 that's not the library atrium, and everybody is moving in the direction they need to. I wouldn't have come to you 6 years ago asking for a social worker. I like social workers, one in particular, you know, but I wouldn't have come to you asking for a social worker. If I was asking for a position, it would be a librarian, right? Like that's what we do. But if we don't have those circumstances, we're going to continue to be what people refer to as the last public space. We're going to end up being a public space where people are coming when they are first arriving in our city and looking for support. And I can respond badly to that, but I can't change that pressure. I can't change the fact that that pressure is going to exist on our institution. So my goal is to keep looking big with all the good stuff that we can do, but also manage that pressure by pushing back with the social worker position. So that's my appeal. I hope I didn't go on too long. I probably talked longer than some of the other folks, but that's my appeal.
Then especially recently, but I think the last 3 to 5 years, there's been a lot of people that have called, text, or, you know, met me on the street and have told me that they've stopped going to the library. So I know that you do have, I think you, the marketing you've done, I think you have different groups from different schools and other groups that have coming in and making up for that. But I think it would be amiss to not acknowledge the fact that there's been a lot of local families. Just the other day, I stopped to let a young man walk by with his 2 children, and the maze that he had to go through, he literally got up to the door and I just kind of watched, and he literally turned around and left. I have several elderly ladies that have told me that used to be their pastime to go to with their book club, and they do not feel comfortable to go anymore. And I have met with Olivia and talked with her a couple of times, and she told me that, and I haven't talked with her for a while, but I was amazed that she said she has between 24 and 38 service providers, depending upon her assessment of the person in need, of who to call and how to help. And I think that's great in one way. In another way, you know, you're a library. You know, you're not the expert homeless provider and you know, substance use addiction person. And I commend you that you have somebody to deal with it. But on the other hand, it seems like it's attracting more and more and more of these individuals that it's hard to for you to keep up with. So I guess that I feel you know, the library is really for everybody. And it almost seems like it's sort of been hijacked to a lot of people. And a lot of people can go in there, but I think that it's something that is a concern. It's something that's loudly talked about in the community. And to fund another position on, you know, for the taxpayers, when I see that it may contribute to the issue being as bad, if not worse, because we're going to continue to provide a service at the library. And we've got a new committee we're putting together, and I'm wondering if somehow we as a city can't help you, the library, as you said, try to move this into the hands of better experts and give the library, you know, a lot more of the community a more comfortable experience at the library. So I see the need for it, but I think I'd like to see, you know, we've been talking about with grants and monies going out, some more data. You know, this is good for when I look at 220 referrals. That's, you know, for the activity I see down there, that's less than 1 a day. So it's just, you know, for our whole position, I guess I would like to have seen better results.
I'm happy to respond, but I don't know if that's normal. Yeah, right. So I'm sorry, it sounds like I was unclear. Olivia is the pressure out of the library. She's helping refer people out of the building. Like her goal is to get people into the service provider situations that we are not the experts in. That's not the goal. If she was trying to be the substance abuse counselor and case manager and housing coordinator for every homeless person in Bangor, that would be absurd, right? And so we will drown under homeless people who will still come into the library without her position. Her position is about the pressure out. We can do things to kick people out of the library for behavior. We do it all the time. It's demoralizing and crushing. I barely have a week that goes by that I don't kick somebody in abject terror of starvation out of the library for something they've done that's unacceptable, right? It's unbelievably demoralizing. I can keep doing that and just eventually have all of my staff keep doing that and quit, and then we don't have any staff for like the finance department. But I was listening, you know, so, but that's not a good plan. And so the social worker position does all the things you said that you want to happen. She's not an attraction to the library. Homeless people aren't coming to Bangor because they heard there's a social worker in the library. Homeless people are unhoused in Bangor, and she's pushing them back to the different service providers who are able to help them. Do they come back the next day? Possibly, right? If they're not engaging in misconduct, but they may come back the next day. But the folks who are actually engaging with services are the ones who settle in and become part of the library. The folks who are on city property around the library are part of that maze that you described. I walked through it to get here from the library today. That's another discussion, right? But we will continue to do everything we can to connect unhoused people with the service providers who actually provide the services, so that we're not the ones doing that. That is our goal. Having Olivia there is not an attraction to the library. It's not like we didn't have unhoused people overwhelming library services before Olivia arrived. And it's not like she's increased the number of unhoused people in Bangor or the number of unhoused people in the library. If anything, it's part of a key part of decreasing the number of unhoused people and the number of unhoused people who are engaging in unacceptable behaviors in the library. So I'm sorry, it sounds like I was unclear, made it sound like I was saying like she's bringing people into the library for services. The people are coming already. This is a way of managing that constant pressure that we're feeling.
Councilor Grant?
I mean, for me, this increase, it's an investment we have to make. And not every interaction Olivia has ends in a referral. I go there for coffee and I see with my own eyes what happens, and a lot of times it's just a conversation. When you mention that, library is the last public space, that's exactly what it is. One of the things that this council decided not to do, we had an option to do a safe outdoor space. Trying to create other places for people to be, and I've heard it since I've been elected about, when this is the Heart Center when it existed. And just anecdotally, just looking at this winter when the warming centers were operating, you didn't see the maze. You didn't have that problem. There'd be a few people, maybe people in the atrium, but it wasn't there, and it's still, again, we have work as a council and what this homelessness community is going to do for us to figure out where that next space is going to be. But in the meantime, we absolutely cannot pull the plug on that position, because it really is like the last wall. Because for every one person that I talk to who says I don't go there anymore, 5, 6, 7 more people talk about how much they love the library. My family, my children, we love the library. And is it uncomfortable to see sometimes? Sure. But you know what? I'll hold their hands and we're going to go to the library because it belongs to all of us. And, so absolutely, I'm grateful for everything that Olivia does. I'm grateful for the library that you've gotten thrust in the front lines of this, and just the heroes work that just doesn't get sung enough, that everybody in the library. And when I first moved to Bangor, learning the fact that before any of this was even the big crisis it was, that librarians were taking trainings to learn how to help people who are unhoused and everything. I am grateful for the library, and to me this is a small ask, and I have no problem agreeing to it, and I appreciate you putting it forward.
Councilman.
Just really quickly, thanks so much for coming in, Ben. I very much appreciate your perspective, and I do have to concur with the Council Rebecca as well. I do have a question though regarding when we first did this position, it was a joint operation between the county and the council. I know this is a very awkward question. I don't even know if it's possible. Like, is it at all possible for us to have communications with the county to see if they'd be willing to actually combine forces again on this? Because it was originally a dual approach, and I think it is important to maintain that partnership with the county.
The question. We can. Hands everywhere. Council Walker.
Thank you, Ben, for coming in. I really appreciate it and the work that you put into this. I actually had the library on my radar, as you have seen me recently. But in the last month, I've been trying to get over to the library, and I brought my grandson. We had lunch this week, and we sat there for a long time and looked, and I kind of just kept an eye out to see what was going on. I did see one unhoused person sitting on one of the benches, but I saw a lot of people coming in and out of the library, which made me feel really good because I love the library, and in the 15 years I've been here, I've had the opportunity to bring my nephew there, walk there, we go in there, enjoy the third floor very much. I did take my 9-year-old grandson that was with me to the third floor. It was just a really good experience. And as far as the position, I am in favor of the position. I think like you said, like weren't trying to say that like her position being that we're announcing that that's what you wanted. I can't remember the term at least. But that she's not there to bring people there for that specific thing. But I have worked with Olivia, and I know a lot of the unhoused and not unhoused that's run into Olivia have said nothing but really great things about her, and she does refer out. In my other capacity in the community, I have been able to work, and I just really appreciate the work that you do, and I'm very in favor of this position, and thank you.
Council Bean.
Yes, well, thank you, Ben, for everything you do, and I'm hoping that at some point the library will become a library, not a service center. I think our goal would be to move the unhoused elsewhere. And with the advisory committee that we're forming, hopefully that will happen. I mean, you said maybe it'll be a year, maybe 6 months, maybe it'll be 18 months, we don't really know. But in the interim, where this position obviously is taking a lot of the burden off you and helping the unhoused. Say in 6 months, we have a solution. They're no longer in the library. We have created a position that is really not necessary. Does that position move on somewhere else? Do you need someone like that in the library? Long-term, this is not a permanent position. One would hope.
Right.
And if it is, I think we have a serious problem. So where do we see this going?
That's a great question. I don't want to need a social worker in the library for the rest of my time there, which hopefully is a good long period of time. Another, say 15 years or so, right? I don't want another 15 years with a social worker in the library, because that means that the library is still the hub, the only public space where people are landing when they enter the community. That means that there's a huge population of unhoused people in the community. That's what that means if we retain that position. If 6 months from now, if let's say 6 months into the fiscal year, all homelessness has evaporated in Bangor, I would be shocked. I don't see that happening. So I think we are looking at a 1 year situation at least, but probably more like 5-10 years. Like it could be longer. That we don't have solutions about where unhoused people are going to go in Bangor. I'd love to see that resolved in a year. That'd be great, but I don't know how we do that. That's in fact not, something that I'm an expert in. And so if we're in a situation where we don't need a social worker, we're not gonna continue asking for funding for a social worker, and we won't come back and be like, hey, we eliminated the social worker position, but now we have a new librarian on staff, and we, you know, it's not something where we just eliminate one position and use the funds in some other way. I think we've been very trustworthy about actually like running a budget deficit when we had extra cash on hand. Like, I think we're pretty transparent about what we're doing with public funds. And there's a reason for that. It's a lot easier to remember the truth, you know? So the truth is if we did not need a social worker position, then we would eliminate the position. We'd find a way to eliminate that position. I don't know when that's gonna happen though. Realistically, I don't see that 6 months down the road. I think if we tomorrow opened a palace, which I don't think is a great idea, but like if tomorrow opened a palace and said this palace is only for people with no home. I don't think that would change the situation in the library enough, because that palace would start kicking people out as they did things that they shouldn't, and they'd end up in the library, and then we'd be kicking. And so like I don't see that need going away immediately. So I don't want to give you false hope that I'm like, yeah, this is a 1-year thing. Olivia, work on your resume because this is a 1-year thing. And Olivia, if you're watching, hey, work it down. But I don't want to give you false hope. Like, yeah, this is probably a 1-year thing. I'm not confident that the library won't continue to have that pressure on it a year from now or after one fiscal year. But when the library doesn't have that pressure, the library is never gonna not have unhoused people. I guarantee you, the first library that opened in Rome, like the first guy in was Cicero, and the second guy was the homeless guy. Like it's like libraries have homeless people in them and always have, and that's not. I mean, you go to any city, any service center in America, you'll see this. It's not a Bangor thing. So it's not like we're gonna suddenly not have unhoused people in the library at some point, and then I'll know that we don't need. But it's when the pressure is not so dramatic as it is right now. I realize that sounds like, like I'm not making a real commitment. It's because I don't know what the future holds, but I can promise that when we don't need a social worker position, I'm not gonna let's keep the social worker on, or let's convert this into a librarian position.
If I could just follow up just on that. Okay. What is her incentive to stay though, knowing that this should be a temporary position? That's
a good
another
question.
part of it.
That's a good question. I think I don't know. I can't say for sure that, I feel like her commitment to the work that she does in the library is really strong. I know her fairly well now, and I feel like that's her incentive, is loving the work, not so much like maintaining I don't know. I think the other thing is, I mentioned I have a wife who's a social worker. Social workers do move quite a bit, move positions quite a bit. And so it's not unusual for social workers to be able to find other jobs. So I think if she was, and to do so relatively quickly. So I think not leaving now is not the same thing as if you were like a college professor or a doctor in a hospital or something like that, where you're like, well, I hope to make a career at this one place, and there's not another hospital for miles, or there's not another university for miles, and I have tenure. It's not the same kind of dynamic. Social workers change positions quite a bit, and so I think, I can't speak for her obviously, but I think she's really committed to the work.
Also, Leonard?
I was just gonna say, could I borrow that paper really quick? I wanted to sort of do a little visual point. So on the point of this being a temporary position, unless council decides to make an active change to have that no longer be a position, this is very likely going to continue to be a position, because even if we did open up another public space for people to go to, this line right here, it without knowing the exact formula, if we were to have 27 right here, that line going down that way is, that's not realistic. That's not actually in reality to something that can actually happen. It's more likely if we do open up a public space, that line would plateau and then maybe start to go down. But realistically, you're still gonna be looking at a position that's needed, even if we do everything that does decrease that population, you're still gonna see, I mean, certainly for the next like 2 or 3 years, we're gonna need this position at minimum. So I get where you're coming from, Counselor Dean, that this is not a, sorry to draw on that, but there's just no realistic way that we can not have this position for the next 2 to 3 years. It's just, we're gonna have to work with it in our budget because there's too much of a need at this point. I know it's only for like maybe 1 referral a day or something like that, but that's still huge for you guys.
Yeah.
Councilor Carson, you've been waiting.
I'm in favor of maintaining this position for now. I think we're forming the advisory committee on homelessness. That committee is going to take leadership on that question with experts. And I don't think we do ourselves any favor by making an already complicated, right, storm of moving pieces. It doesn't make it any better for us to move another piece. I think I really want to see that committee come together. I really want to hear from the experts that we get on that committee. I want us to have a plan. And so I'm just personally disinterested in making any changes to the landscape until we actually have a plan. But I also agree with Councillor Dean, but I think that the goal should be that this is not where the pressure is on this question. And I also agree with Councillor Leonard, and really, I think I would really like us to push on that question of county involvement in funding. This pressure that happens here is in part as a result of a lack of coordination and leadership and funding from the county, right? And there are communities that, because they do not have the infrastructure and they don't have the funding, that utilize Bangor as a service center, which is natural. That's going to happen. That's what a service center does. But I don't think that absolves the county of its responsibility of participating in the effective leadership of this question. So I'm sort of all those pieces. Thank you.
Councilor Mellon?
Yeah, just one quick question, Ben. Our contribution is a percentage of the total, right?
Percentage of the total revenue that the library has, is that?
No, your deficit or whatever you want to call it, we pay up. What percentage of the budget do we now?
Have that number.
Is it increasing from or decreasing?
Oh, that's an increase, definitely. Yeah. I can get you that number. I'm looking at the wrong sheet of paper. It's
1.29%.
That's no percent of
Oh, that's all.
their budget.
Yeah.
What percent of the budget of the library do we pay?
right here. I'm pretty sure that number is 70. Which, I mean, it's.
And it has been that for a while. I thought it was around in the 60s. So it's increasing every year. So eventually we're going to take over the library.
I'll just give you an accurate answer and then I'll definitely respond. Sorry. Yes, 70%. So this is, yeah, it's increased a little bit each year. The library's other revenue streams are not ones that are likely to go up, right? So we're not likely to see, if we see a 5% increase in employment costs. We're not likely to see donors give 5% more. We're not likely to see a 5% increase in what we can draw from our endowment. State government hasn't been increasing how much they give in the area reference and resource center funding by 5% each year, and that's unlikely to happen. So yeah, we come and say, this is what it costs to renew the library for another year. Yeah, I know, renew, right, the library for another year. And then whenever we are looking for other ways to fund things that we need to do, it happens off budget with grants. So the grant funds a specific project that we're doing.
But at 70% of the cost of the library, what input do we have to the operation of the library? On your board of directors or board of, I think they're, what are they, corporators? What do you call them? Trustees?
Board of trustees. And
how many members do we provide to the board?
5 of the 9 members, one of whom is an employee that you hired, the director of finance, Stephanie. The other 4 you name as Hersey Fund trustees, and that's done by this body. One of them's in the audience today, and Marie Becker-Spence.
I was just curious because I didn't know if we had any vote or not.
I can name who they are.
It doesn't matter as long as I know you're saying that we have 5 of the
9, yeah.
1 non-voting.
No, all voting.
Does finance vote? They never used to.
Stephanie is fully empowered to vote, and so was Debbie, and so was David. Like they're,
Was there a past practice that they didn't vote?
Used to be.
I wasn't aware of that, and I certainly saw those.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
So
Council Crowell.
I am happy to provide more information about who the trustee.
Basically, I'm just surprised that it's increasing so much. I'd like to think there was ways that we could keep it reduce it or keep it at one rate.
My question is about grants that you just mentioned, and I see, full year 26, there's, quite an increase here. And I see that in here you have a note that the grant totals don't include recurring grant funds committed previously, and so I have a question about, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And you also said that grants use those to fund specific projects. I'm wondering if we're missing opportunities to fund other things besides just small specific projects that could impact the larger operation of the library. I'm wondering what opportunities are out there that we might be missing.
Yeah, okay. Well, so the first question, so for instance, the Maine Community Foundation maintains the Leonard and Rennie Minsky fund, which is publicly available information that gives us $3,000 a year. So you can do the math as to what percent, like what's in that fund, but it's a very generous gift. And of course, that Rennie Minsky just passed away, and then Len passed away earlier. But that fund isn't included in our list of grants because that goes directly into the operating budget. It is specifically for children's programming, but we use it for children's programming. It's we don't have a separate classed fund. It shows up as part of the revenue that we get. It shows up as donations that we receive. So part of the whatever that is in a given year, and I believe we've budgeted 110,000. Yeah, we budgeted 110,000 for annual giving from the public. 3 of that would be the Leonard and Rennie money that we receive. But there's more that are like that, where somebody's given us a gift, but we don't hold the. It's not like the endowment where we actually hold the principal in our own pooled investments. So does that answer that question? Like what we meant by that? Okay, right, yeah. And so that's an example. That's not the only fund that does that, but that's a good example where people know. Are we missing opportunities for grants? I'm sure. We apply for a lot of them. We do have a development position, and we also have department heads who do a lot of work. Now that development position doesn't just sit and apply for grants all day. Siobhan does a lot of program development work. programs that bring people into the library, and she also manages the annual appeal. That's a source of $110,000 in revenue. So certainly more than pays for her position. But in terms of grant funding, usually what we do, so there's one that I didn't mention. We saw that the Semi-Quincentennial Commission was providing grant funding. And we had this collection of materials that was actually the property of the Historical Society, but it's old assessor records and then Works Progress Administration photos from the 30s of a bunch of many of the homes or buildings in Bangor. And so we're able to do a scanning project using Semi-Quincentennial Commission money from the state to actually scan all of those records and scan all of those images. That's the kind of thing where nobody really wants to go in and actually look through all of those to see a photo of their house. And people may not even know we have access to that collection or that we house the collection for the Historical Society. But if we have it up on a website, then people can go in and see things and see the historical value of their home, see bits of Bangor history as a result. So that's the kind of thing where we wouldn't come to the council and ask for money for that, right? That's the type of thing we need to find grant funding for. Whenever we see an opportunity like that, we go out to the folks in the departments, and Siobhan and I, or the department heads, find it themselves, and we talk about, well, what are we looking to do? Oh, we want to improve the materials we have for STEAM programs, science, tech, engineering, arts, and math for kids. We need to have new tech, or it looks like it's, we're teaching them how to play with an abacus, and so we go out and get new tech using a grant. So that kind of thing. I'm sure we've missed some opportunities, but there's a lot of work that we do about finding grant funding, and there's a lot of people who want to put money behind us because we have a lot of people don't use that.
I just want to wrap it up by saying that, I do appreciate the library event and the addition that was done, how long has it been now? 3 years now?
It's been 10 years.
Oh my God.
Yes, I know.
It's beautiful. I mean, and the upstairs, and this position, I appreciate what Olivia's done. It's been remarkable. But I think when I see the position on it's the end of ARPA, I was concerned that this would be the start of, as Councilor Dean said, a permanent position. And with us putting together the homeless committee that we're putting together, I was kind of hoping that there's a solution that would be helpful. So moving forward, I am for this position because now would be the worst time. The situation at the library is just going to get worse. So my comments were really with the concern of this being a perpetual position. And really, I don't want to see the library be a perpetual service center. I would rather have you be less of a service center so that the city and through our other service providers can take that off your desk. And I hope that we see you often reaching out to us and working with our committee to help, leave some of that burden away from the library for a better experience for all involved. So I just wanted to wrap it up to make sure that, it's not, I'm anti-library and, but it's just a concern that I hate to see you in this position forever.
Yes, yeah. I know you're not anti-library, don't worry.
City manager.
Well, so this went about a half hour longer than I was hoping, which I think is in the grand scheme of things, not that bad, the way things have been going recently. So I'll end with, this is our first budget meeting that you and I have had. We don't have many first lefts, I don't think, after 10 months. But if you aren't happy with how that went, or if you would like to hear different things or have us bring different information, just let me know and we can pivot, going forward. I think this should be a collaborative and iterative process. So let me know what it is that you need and we'll do our best to bring it to you.
We're good.
And we're good.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, thank you all.
Great seeing you.